Nineveh, around 700 BC, in the heart of the greatest empire the world had yet seen, workmen are carving a wall, not a monument to a god, not a hunting scene. They are carving in obsessive, panel-by-panel detail across a room some 70 feet long in the king's own palace. The destruction of a single foreign city. Every siege engine, every archer, every ladder against the wall, the ramp, the defenders on the towers. The families walking out into exile with their belongings on their backs. And the king himself, seated on his throne outside the gates, receiving the spoils of a town most people today have never heard of. Imagine you are the most powerful man alive. Your empire runs from the Persian Gulf to the edge of Egypt. You have crushed Babylon, humbled Phoenicia, and taken tribute from kings who once thought themselves untouchable. You can decorate the throne room of your palace with anything in the world. Any victory, any conquest, any moment from a career of total war. And out of everything you have ever done, the thing you choose to carve, in the largest and most detailed set of war reliefs the ancient world ever produced, is the capture of a fortified hill town in the Judean lowlands called Lachish. That was the decision of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and it is the strangest and most revealing choice in ancient military propaganda. Because Lachish was not his capital-taking, empire-ending triumph. It was a stop on a campaign, and the campaign's real target, the city he actually marched to break, does not appear on that wall at all. What Sennacherib carved into stone gave history something it has almost never had. A battle we can watch. Not read about, watch. In the enemy's own images, blow by blow. And then, 26 centuries later, archaeologists dug into the hill at Lachish and found the ramp still there, exactly where the sculptors had drawn it. The arrowheads, the slingstones, the helmet crests, a mass grave. This is the most thoroughly documented battle of the ancient world, told by 3 independent witnesses who normally agree on nothing. The empire that won it, the people who lost it, and the dirt itself. And the reason Sennacherib had to carve Lachish at all is the very thing that made his campaign a failure. To understand why an Assyrian army came down on a Judean town in 701 BC, you have to understand what Assyria was, because it was something new in the world. By the 8th century BC, the Neo-Assyrian Empire had turned war into an industry. It had standing professional forces, iron weapons, cavalry, engineers, and a logistical system that could move an army hundreds of miles and keep it fed and supplied at the far end. And it had something more disturbing than any of that, a deliberate policy of terror and a deportation machine to go with it. Assyria did not simply defeat rebellious peoples, it uprooted them, moving entire populations hundreds of miles from their homelands and resettling them among strangers, so that the memory of independence had nowhere to take root. Whole nations were dissolved this way. The northern kingdom of Israel had been swallowed by exactly this machine a generation earlier. The empire ran on tribute. Vassal kings paid and stayed alive. And when a great king died, the vassals across the empire always did the same thing. They tested the new one. Sennacherib came to the throne in 705 BC, and the western provinces revolted. Among the rebels was Hezekiah, king of Judah, a small kingdom in the hills, whose capital was Jerusalem. Hezekiah's rebellion was not a shout of defiance from a man who hadn't thought it through. It was prepared. He had been fortifying, stockpiling, and reorganizing for years, and the most famous piece of that preparation is still walkable today. Facing the certainty that any Assyrian army would try to besiege Jerusalem and cut its water, Hezekiah's engineers cut a tunnel more than 1/3 of a mile through solid bedrock beneath the city, diverting the flow of the Gihon Spring from outside the walls to a pool safely inside them. 2 teams dug toward each other from opposite ends and met in the middle underground, a fact recorded in an inscription carved into the tunnel wall by the workmen themselves in the ancient Hebrew script, describing the moment the picks broke through and the water began to run. It is one of the most extraordinary engineering documents to survive from the ancient world. Judah was small, but it was not naive. It knew exactly what was coming, and it spent years getting ready for the siege it was about to invite. What Hezekiah could not do was make his fortresses bigger than the machine coming for them. In 701 BC, Sennacherib came west to collect what rebellion costs. His own account, inscribed on clay prisms, several of which survive, boasts that he took 46 of Hezekiah's walled cities and countless smaller settlements, and carried off a staggering number of people as plunder. The figure he claims is over 200,000, and historians treat it with caution. Royal Assyrian numbers were propaganda, meant to overwhelm rather than to audit. But the shape of the claim is not in doubt. Judah was being systematically dismantled town by town, and the strong point standing between the Assyrian army and Jerusalem was Lachish. Lachish was not a village. It was the second city of Judah, the military anchor of the whole southwestern approach to the capital, sitting on a natural hill with steep slopes on nearly every side. Its people had spent generations turning that hill into a problem. The city was ringed with a massive wall, with a second wall lower down the slope, and between and below them, the slope itself had been shaped into a hard, steep glacis that an attacker had to climb under fire before he could even touch the stonework. The gate, the weak point of any ancient city, and everyone knew it, was protected by a fortified gatehouse complex, one of the largest ever found in the region, forcing anyone approaching to turn and expose his flank. For any normal army in the ancient Near East, a place like Lachish was not a battle. It was a decision. Sit down and starve it out for months or walk away. Sennacherib's army did neither. It built a mountain. Here is where the Assyrian war machine separates itself from everything around it. Unable to climb the slope and unwilling to wait, the engineers picked the one corner of the hill where the ground rose closest to the wall, the southwest, and began constructing an artificial ramp of rubble, earth, and boulders, packed and layered, driving it up the hillside toward the city's defenses. This was industrial-scale engineering, carried out inside bowshot of an enemy determined to kill you. Thousands of tons of material, hauled and dumped and compacted by soldiers and laborers under a constant rain of arrows, sling stones, and anything the defenders could drop. The Assyrians answered with mass archery, volleys to sweep the parapets and keep heads down while the ramp crept upward, and with mobile shelters and screens to protect the working parties. Think about the arithmetic of that ramp for a moment, because it is the part people skip. To reach a wall standing on high ground, the ramp has to climb the entire height of the slope, and then some. And it has to be wide enough and solid enough at the top to carry multi-ton wheeled machines without collapsing under them. That means an enormous volume of material, stone and rubble and packed earth, every piece of it gathered, carried, and placed by hand. There were no shortcuts and no machines to build the machine's road. There was only labor, organized on a scale most ancient kingdoms could not have imagined. And the discipline to keep that labor working in the open while men on the wall above shot at them all day. The Assyrians could do this in weeks. That was the true weapon. Not the ram, not the archers, but the ability to reshape the landscape faster than a city could endure being besieged. When word spread that the Assyrian army was coming, this is what it actually meant. Not that they would starve you out, but that they would build a road to your front door. And when the ramp reached the wall, they drove the siege engines up it. The reliefs show us these machines in detail, and they are not the crude battering rams of imagination. They are wheeled, armored assault vehicles, a protected body with a shield roof to deflect what came from above, a projecting beam tipped in metal at the front to punch and lever apart masonry, and a small turret at the top where an archer rode to shoot down at the men on the wall. Several of them are shown working the ramp at once. Attached to the front of at least one, the sculptors carved something small that tells you everything about how this fight was going. A long-handled ladle. Assyrian crews carried water to pour on their own machines because the defenders were dropping fire on them. That single detail is the entire siege in miniature, because the reliefs also show what came down from the walls. Torches, blazing bundles, whatever the people of Lachish could set alight and throw. The defenders on the towers appear with bows drawn, with slings, with stones raised in both hands. There is nothing passive about the way the enemy carved them, and that is one of the strangest things about this record. It comes from the winners, but it does not depict Lachish as weak. Assyrian propaganda didn't work by mocking the defeated. It worked by showing that resistance was real, competent, and futile. So picture it from the inside on the last day, from a rampart on the southwest corner. You have watched the hill in front of your city change shape over weeks. A scar of packed rubble climbing steadily toward you, closer every morning than it was the night before. You know exactly what it means, and you cannot stop it. The men who built it worked behind shields while your arrows came down, and eventually your arrows ran short. Now the machines are on it. You can hear the timbers, the wheels, the beam striking the stone below you, in a rhythm you feel through the wall in your feet. Fire is going down from the parapet in armfuls, and the smoke is blowing back into your eyes. Behind you, the streets of the city are full of people who came inside the walls from the countryside because this was the strong place, the safe place. And somewhere in the dust below, standing off at a safe distance among his guards, is the king of Assyria in his chariot, watching your city the way an engineer watches a machine he is confident in. The wall came down. The archaeology is blunt about what happened next. The city was stormed and destroyed, and the destruction layer left in the ground is thick and total. Burned debris, collapsed masonry, buildings brought down and burned across the site. What followed is on the wall at Nineveh too, and it has to be described honestly, because this was the point of the whole exercise. The reliefs show the population of Lachish leaving in a long file, men, women, and children, carrying bundles and driving carts, moving out of the ruined gate into deportation. And in among those panels, the sculptors also carved the fate of some of the captured defenders. Men being executed and men impaled on stakes outside the city. This was not accidental cruelty, it was policy, made visual on purpose. The Assyrian state wanted the entire empire to know precisely what happened to a city that resisted, and it carved the answer on the wall of the throne room, where foreign envoys and vassal kings would come to stand and look at it while they waited for an audience. The room was, in a very real sense, a weapon. Now hold that thought. The winners built a monument out of one town's destruction because it is the setup for the thing they did not build. 26 centuries later, archaeologists came to the hill, and this is where the story turns from art history into something rarer. Excavations at the site found the siege ramp still in place against the southwest corner. A solid mass of stone and earth fused into the hillside. It is, as far as we know, the only Assyrian siege ramp ever found. Inside the city, they found what a storming leaves behind. A thick, burnt destruction layer, and against the inside of the wall opposite the ramp, evidence that the defenders had thrown up a counter-ramp, a desperate inner mound built to raise the defense higher as the outer one rose against them. Excavators recovered arrowheads by the hundreds, sling stones, pieces of armor scale, and the bronze crest holders and fittings from soldiers' helmets. In a nearby cave, a mass burial containing the disordered remains of what is commonly cited as around 1,500 people, thrown together with animal bones and debris, the cleanup after the sack, though the exact circumstances are debated. And there is one more category of find, smaller than a ramp and far more human. Excavation at Lachish also turned up storage jar handles, stamped with a royal seal, the mark of the Kingdom of Judah, showing a winged emblem and the Hebrew word meaning belonging to the king, along with the name of one of 4 administrative towns. Thus stamped handles turn up across Judah in exactly this period, and the standard reading is that they mark jars from a royal supply system, grain, wine, or oil distributed and stockpiled by the crown. In other words, a state preparing its fortresses for a war it knew was coming, filling the storerooms of places like Lachish. The people inside those walls were not caught by surprise. They had been provisioned, organized, and told to hold. and the jars that were meant to feed the siege ended up smashed in the burn layer, stamped with the name of the king who could not save them. Stop and appreciate what this means. We can put the Assyrian relief and the excavation reports side by side and check the enemy's artwork against the ground, and the ground agrees. The ramp is where they drew it. The fighting is where they drew it. The weapons in the dirt are the weapons in the carving. Ancient history almost never gets this. We usually have one voice, written a century later by someone with an agenda, and we do our best. At Lachish, we have the empire's official picture, the victim's written testimony in the Hebrew scriptures, the king's own boasting prism, and a hillside full of physical evidence, all describing the same 3 weeks in 701 BC, which brings us to the empty space on the palace wall, and the reason this story matters more than any other siege of its size. There is one more figure in that room worth naming, because he is the reason we can be so certain about the identification. Above the scene, carved into the stone alongside the panels, runs a caption in cuneiform, the Assyrian equivalent of a title card. It states that Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, sat upon his throne and reviewed the spoil taken from Lachish. The city is named in the winner's own script on the winner's own wall. That single line is why nobody has to guess which siege is being depicted, and it is why the reliefs and the excavated hill could be matched to each other in the first place. An empire obsessed with its own glory labeled the evidence, and the label outlived the empire. Sennacherib did not come west to take Lachish. He came to break Judah, and Judah meant Jerusalem. After Lachish fell, the Assyrians moved on the capital, and the campaign ended without the city being stormed. On this, all the sources are strange and interesting. The Assyrian prism does not claim to have captured Jerusalem. It says instead that Sennacherib shut Hezekiah up in his royal city like a bird in a cage, built earthworks against him, and extracted an enormous tribute of gold, silver, and treasure. That is a boast, and read closely, it is also an admission. An Assyrian king who takes a rebel capital says so, in detail, with the population deported and the walls thrown down, and a relief on his wall to prove it. Like a bird in a cage is what you write when the bird is still in the cage. The Hebrew account in the books of Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah agrees on the outcome and explains it very differently. Hezekiah paid an immense tribute, stripping even the temple to do it. And then, as the siege pressed on, the Assyrian army suffered a catastrophe in the night, a mass death in the camp, and Sennacherib withdrew to Nineveh. Centuries later, the Greek historian Herodotus preserved yet another version, an Egyptian tradition of field mice swarming the Assyrian camp and destroying their equipment, a story historians have long noted may echo an outbreak of disease. What actually happened outside Jerusalem is beyond us now. Plague, politics, trouble elsewhere in the empire, a payment that made further war unprofitable. All have been argued, and honest history has to leave it open. But the strategic result is not open at all. Judah survived. Hezekiah stayed on his throne, paying but alive. Jerusalem was not sacked, not burned, not deported. And it would be more than a century before a different empire. Babylon finally did what Assyria could not. And Sennacherib went home to Nineveh, to a palace with a room-sized celebration of a hill town on the wall, because the room where he received the world's ambassadors needed a story of total victory. And Lachish was the biggest one he had brought back from the west. There is a lesson in that, and it is older than Assyria and truer than any wall. Propaganda tells you what a power achieved. What it chooses to celebrate tells you what it failed to achieve. The scale of the Lachish reliefs, 70 feet of the most detailed war art the ancient world produced for a provincial fortress on a secondary front, is not the measure of how important Lachish was. It is the measure of how badly Sennacherib needed a victory to carve. And the final irony belongs to Lachish. Sennacherib built that room to erase a rebellious town from history and to warn everyone else. It did the opposite. That wall, quarried, carved, hauled, and installed to glorify an empire that no longer exists, whose capital was itself burned and buried within a century, is now the reason a small Judean city, destroyed and deported and forgotten by nearly everyone, is the best documented battle of the entire ancient world. Its people have no monument of their own, they have the enemy's. Today, those panels sit in the British Museum, and anyone can walk in and stand where the vassal kings once stood and look at the men of Lachish on their towers, bows drawn, stones raised, fighting a machine that had never been stopped, carved by their conquerors and preserved by accident for 2,600 years. Assyria carved Lachish in stone to prove that resistance was pointless. What survives instead is the resistance. The empire that built the reliefs is gone, and the ramp it built is still there. The only one of its kind on Earth, a hill of packed rubble against a slope in the Judean lowlands, waiting to tell anyone who digs into it exactly how the most efficient war machine of the ancient world took a city, and exactly how it failed to take the one that mattered,